Imagine that in 1836, a distraught young woman wrote a letter to Joseph Smith. Imagine also that in that letter, she described having received counsel from Joseph about engaging in relationships with men. That based on Smith's counsel, she began seeing a young man frequently at her lodgings. Imagine also that in the letter, this desperate young woman, in a pointed fashion, recounted to Joseph the details of a private meeting she had with him in Oliver Cowdery's bedroom. Imagine that she sternly reminded her prophet leader that he had promised to defend her honor if her character were questioned because of the relationship with the young man. Now imagine that Joseph later not only betrayed the promise to defend the young woman, but instead contributed to rumors that branded the young woman as unvirtuous. What would we conclude about Joseph because of such a letter? Of course, no such epistle exists regarding Joseph Smith. But there is a letter written in 1841 by a young Mormon woman named Sarah Crooks concerning a different Mormon leader. You may recall her name. Sarah was one of the main characters of the story we told in episode 8, the story of the companion revelation and William Clayton. You'll recall that Sarah was William's love interest. On today's episode, I'll introduce you to one of the most important documents in all of early Mormon polygamy history, a letter that I believe is a key to understanding events occurring in England prior to what will occur regarding spiritual wifery a few years later in Nauvoo. That document is Sarah Crooks' 1841 letter to Brigham Young. This is the first part of a series of episodes that will discuss this very important document and its connection to a host of other evidence of spiritual wife doctrine activity in the first British mission. Ready? Let's go.
This is Still Mormon, the show dedicated to unsettling Mormon history.
Welcome back to Still Mormon. I'm Jeremy, your host, and today I'm going to share with you the story of Sarah Crooks and her letter to Brigham Young. Our story begins in northern England. On March 14, 1841, from her humble apartment in Manchester, recent Mormon convert Sarah Crooks wrote a poignant and courageous letter to Latter-day Saint apostle Brigham Young, then serving as a missionary in Liverpool. She opened directly, "Dear Sir, pardon my boldness which I've used in writing to you. Were it not that my spirit has been wounded but beyond measure, I would not attempt to write. I suppose," she wrote, "I may as well speak plain, as I want that you should know what it is that has wounded me." Her letter was a plea for answers and justice amid swirling rumors that she had acted immorally with one of the Brotherton sons. The Brothertons were a working-class family of 9 in Manchester, England. They were introduced to Joseph Smith's restoration message in 1840 by Brigham Young and Heber Kimball. These missionaries labored for months with the Brotherton family, teaching parents and children alike, including the youngest 16-year-old twin daughters. Elizabeth, the eldest daughter, was the first in the family to convert. She was baptized by Young on September 4, 1840, and confirmed a member of the church by Kimball the following week. Soon after, Kimball offered to give her a father's blessing, and she was, quote, overjoyed to receive one from an apostle. She and the family held a profound reverence for Kimball and Young. One by one, each Brotherton accepted the message. Thomas, the father, was the last to be baptized on April 9, 1841. So successfully had Young and Kimball shepherded the family that just 6 months later, Thomas and his wife Sarah were willing to dispose of their property and leave their homeland to join the saints in America. Through their missionary efforts, the apostles formed a deep attachment to the family. By early 1842, Young proposed spiritual marriage to one of the Young twins, Martha. Kimball apparently had some interest in her older sister, Elizabeth, as a spiritual wife, although by July 1843, she would become the second wife of another apostle, Parley Pratt. So in March 1841, when Sarah Crooks wrote to Young about her precarious predicament with one of the Brotherton sons, she was writing about a member of a family with whom Young was already well acquainted and closely connected. 23-year-old Sarah did not write whether it was Edward Brotherton, who was at the time 26, or John, who was 20, or Joseph, who was 18. She explained only that she had been, quote, keeping company with Brotherton starting in late 1840, after which he visited her apartment, quote, very constant for several weeks. Sarah did not specify the nature of their relationship, only implied it in what she wrote. Her next words to Young are among the most revealing in the entire letter. After explaining that Brotherton had frequently, quote, come to her lodgings, she wrote, "And I will leave you to guess the rest." Interestingly, she did not elaborate, which suggests that Young already understood what she meant. Sarah wrote that, quote, never before did she have a thought in her head that their relationship was improper. Brotherton felt the same, saying so, quote, more than once. His own mother and his sisters even supported their relationship, believing it aligned with, quote, the mind of God. Yet, about Christmas, rumors began to circulate throughout Manchester, and Sarah was, quote, much slandered and slighted, being branded unvirtuous. Sarah's words to Young were not an explicit denial that she and Brotherton were engaging in behavior others might regard as improper. Instead, her words indicate only that whatever they were doing, neither she nor Brotherton believed it to be wrong. Importantly, in the wake of public accusations, we might expect Sarah not only to deny any wrongdoing, but also to clarify to Young, for the record, the exact nature of her relationship. If she had written something like, "I know we were alone in my apartment and perhaps it looked untoward, but we only talked, and I swear before heaven that we did nothing wrong ever," then her meaning would be much clearer. Instead, we get ambiguity. "I will leave you to guess the rest." This veiled statement raises an important question. Why might Sarah have expected Young to understand what she meant? She leaves us puzzling over what Young may already have known about the situation. Rather than explicitly declaring and defending her relationship with Brotherton as strictly moral, by the standards of the time, particularly those expressed and expected within the church, she instead invites Young only to guess the rest. This suggests that although she believed the relationship to be right, quote, in the mind of God, she may have been unwilling to commit its details to paper. It also raises the possibility that the relationship crossed boundaries that she understood others, outside her and Young, would regard as improper. Sarah explained that her belief in the rightness of her conduct with Brotherton was consistent with and in consequence of counsel she had received from Heber Kimball. Kimball met with her on multiple occasions. He told Sarah, quote, more than once, that if anyone came along that I thought I could love, to give my heart to them. His counsel to Sarah about relationships with men offered the proviso that it must be, quote, consistent with the mind of the Lord. Sarah followed the counsel and began seeing Brotherton for about a month. Her account suggests that she understood her actions to be justified, even as rumors circulated that called her conduct into question. She wrote, quote, "Sir, no being mortal but myself knows what I've suffered through evil and false reports." In desperation, Sarah turned to God, quote, determined to give the Lord no rest till he would hear my prayer, begging him to send her away from all them by some means or other and deliver her from the public scorn. At the very time she offered up this prayer, Kimball returned, and rather than offering any correction, repeated the counsel he had previously given. She appears to have interpreted both the timing of Kimball's arrival and his words as an answer to prayer. She hoped her troubles, quote, would have an end. She wrote sadly, but alas, alas, it is not so. Gossip of their association continued to circulate for several months. She told Young that, quote, about the time of your last coming to Manchester, which was near the end of February 1841, that even her own mother and sister had heard the evil reports and began to turn away and be cooler toward her. Then, while Young was in Manchester, Brotherton himself suddenly stopped seeing her or speaking to her. Sarah was brought to weep and cry unto the Lord. Sometimes, she wrote, I would moan and sigh for the Lord to plead my cause, for he only knows my heart. Sarah's dear friend Rebecca Partington was concerned for her welfare. Quote, for it was evident to Rebecca, wrote Sarah, that I was injuring my health. The trial she'd endured to this point, she told Young, was nothing compared to the greater indignity she suffered. Quote, for if I've been rightly informed, she stated, those that declared they would defend my character have laid the foundation. Sarah learned from Rebecca that some who had promised to defend her honor had taken part in spreading the reports. Rebecca sought to find out the source of the rumors. And on the evening before Sarah wrote to Young, Rebecca met with Brotherton. She defended her friend, saying that Sarah, quote, was as virtuous a girl as ever lived, and pressed Brotherton on why he'd abandoned Sarah so suddenly. Quote, if he'd heard anything, she asked, why not come and tell Sarah and break up acquaintance properly? Rebecca then confronted him on where he had heard the gossip about Sarah. Brotherton replied, I give you the foundation of my knowledge. It was Brother Young that told me. According to Sarah's account, Brigham had been the source of the information that caused Brotherton to break things off with Sarah so quickly. Sarah then turned from recounting her travails to the main reason for writing. Invoking heaven as her witness, she confronted Brigham directly, demanding, quote, now, sir, I ask you in the presence of the great God, have you so soon forgot what you said in Parley Pratt's upstairs room, that you would defend me and stop even a word that might be spoken against me? She continued, quote, now, sir, has the Spirit of God given you to see that I was not virtuous? If so, why not tell me of it as a friend, seeing I am friendless? Apparently, it was not simply what she believed Young said to Brotherton that was most painful, but that Young had promised to defend her character and yet did not. She appealed to his conscience. Have you seen anything, or do you know of iniquity being found in my hands? I have looked up to you as being a man of God and having what I called a noble spirit, and therefore I was determined to ask you before I would tell anyone else. On the outside of her letter, she added, quote, will you please to write soon directly to number 10 Prussia Street, Oldham Road. I remain your affectionate sister, Sarah Crooks. We don't know if Young ever responded. Now that you know the full story, here's the full context of the full letter. Manchester, March the 14th. Dear sir, pardon my boldness which I've used in writing to you. Were it not that my spirit has been wounded beyond measure, I would not attempt to write. I suppose I may as well speak plain, as I want that you should know what it is that has wounded me. About Christmas, it was reported that B. Brotherton and I were keeping company, in consequence of which I was much slandered and slighted. I never before had such a thought in my head. Neither had Brother Brotherton, for he has said so more than once in about a month after he began to come to my lodgings, and I will leave you to guess the rest. Suffice it to say that he came very constant, and his sisters were friendly to it, and his mother also. They all seemed to think it was the mind of God, in consequence of which, and what Elder Kimball had said to me, for he had told me more than once that if anyone came along that I thought I could love, to give my heart to them, inasmuch as it was consistent with the mind of the Lord. And what made me think the more was his coming at the very time that I had determined to give the Lord no rest till he would hear my prayer and send me away from them all by some means or other. For, sir, no being mortal but myself knows what I've suffered through evil and false reports. I now began to think it would have an end, but alas, alas, it is not so, for what I have suffered was nothing to this. For if I've been rightly informed, those that declared they would defend my character have laid the foundation. And now, sir, I will draw to a close and give it you in short. About the time of your last coming to Manchester, or a little before, mother and sister began to turn away from me and be cooler towards me in consequence of evil reports. He, Brotherton, also ceased to speak to me, and all this, and with other things that I could not help but see, made me to weep and cry unto the Lord. Sometimes I would moan and sigh for the Lord to plead my cause, for he only knows my heart. All this caused Rebekah to feel for my welfare, for it was evident that I was injuring my health. But how to ease my mind she knew not, for she could see as well as I that I was, as it were, the byword amongst many. When at last she thought that she would find out the cause, if possible, and on her seeing Brother Brotherton last night, she said, why he had done as he had, if he had heard anything, why not come and tell me, and break up acquaintance properly, stating at the same time that I was as virtuous a girl as ever lived, to which he replied he did not know that she said, but I know, he then said, it was Brother Young that told me. I give you the foundation of my knowledge, said he. Now, sir, I ask you in the presence of the great God, who I've endeavored to serve all my life long, if you so soon forgot what you said in Pratt's upstairs room, that you would defend me and stop even a word that might be spoken against me. Now, sir, has the Spirit of God given you to see that I was not virtuous? If so, why not tell me of it as a friend, seeing I'm friendless? If not the Spirit of God, have you seen anything? Or do you know of iniquity being found in my hands? I've looked up to you as being a man of God and having what I called a noble spirit, and therefore I was determined to ask you before I would tell anyone else. Will you please write soon, directly, to number 10 Prussia Street? I remain your affectionate sister, Sarah Crooks. Sarah's audacious letter to Brigham Young provides an extraordinary window into the mind and heart of a young woman newly converted to Mormonism in Victorian England. More importantly, it offers critical insight into little-known aspects of early Mormonism. With a letter such as this, I think it's really important to acknowledge, first of all, what we can say we've learned from the letter. What does it really say? And what does it not say? Here's what we can say from what Sarah writes. First of all, she writes that she and Brotherton were together, quote, very constantly for about a month. They both, Sarah and Brotherton, they both believed their relationship was consistent with the mind of the Lord. And so did his mother and sisters believe the same thing. Heber Kimball counseled Sarah regarding relationships with men. Question is why? Why would an apostle, a married man, be meeting with a young woman on more than one occasion privately to counsel her in relationships with men? She tells us that rumors had spread, branding her as unvirtuous. Sarah tells us that she also met with Brigham Young, apparently on more than one occasion, and at least on one occasion in Parley Pratt's upstairs room. In Victorian England, the upstairs rooms of typical working-class row homes were typically the bedroom areas. And again, we have a married apostle meeting in a private setting, a bedroom in this case, with a young single woman. The question is why? Brigham Young, she says, promised to defend her character. That raises the question as to why he would need to. What would she have been doing that might have caused people to speak out against her that would cause Brigham Young to tell her he would defend her? And according to Sarah, Brigham said something to Brotherton that made him stop seeing her. Sarah then also begs Brigham to tell her if she was doing anything unvirtuous. What does she mean by that? Okay, so that's what the letter tells us. Now, what does the letter not say? Sarah doesn't elaborate on what Heber Kimball's teachings were or on the conversations she had with Brigham Young. She provides no detail on what, quote, give her heart to any man meant, or what it meant to be consistent with the mind of the Lord. Sarah doesn't say what led Brotherton's mother and sisters to also believe that what they were doing was, quote, in the mind of God. Sarah doesn't say what Brigham Young told Brotherton. We have no idea what it was that caused him to stop seeing her. Sarah doesn't say why Brigham would need to defend her character. What was it that they were discussing that made her afraid of what people might think? Sarah doesn't describe the nature of her relationship with Brotherton. She writes only, I will leave you to guess the rest. But we are left with a question. With all that we can say we know from the letter and what we can't say because we don't know where she leaves the gaps. How should we interpret this letter? Now, that is what we'll explore in the next episodes. In future episodes about the Sarah Crooks letter, we're going to discuss the context of that letter, the time and place in which Sarah lived, the people she's connected to in the letter, Heber Kimball and Brigham Young, as well as her paramour, William Clayton. We're going to discuss its connection to the companion revelation and to a host of other evidence in the British mission regarding the Spiritual Wife Doctrine. Next time, I'll be having a discussion with my good friend Whitney Horning. We're going to be presenting contextual information that we presented at Sunstone recently with Michelle Stone, where we provided a host of information that has great bearing on Sarah Crooks' letter. You will not want to miss it. We're going to be talking about Heber Kimball and his cause that he'd embraced and how that relates to what Sarah is discussing in her letter to Brigham Young. We will be discussing in a future episode as well the connection to the companion revelation and to William Clayton and his diary, as well as a host of other related evidence and information that was going on between 1840 and 1848 in the British mission. You will not want to miss it. Now, I'll close today's episode where we began. If the letter I read to you today were not from Sarah Crooks to Brigham Young, but were instead from Fanny Alger to Joseph Smith, then what would we say? Just a little food for thought. Well, that's all for today's episode. As always, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And please like this video. Please leave us a comment. Please share it. And for those of you who've been supporting the show, we can't do this without you. So thank you so much. And if you haven't supported us yet and you'd like to, the links are in the description below. That's all for this time. Thanks for stopping by.